I understand how it can be so hard for you right now, where your partner's like, but I get 50% of the vote. Because in my mind, I'm like, I know that it's both of your children, but I don't know the fairness or what is right in terms of like who's taking care of the kids more. Because I know in our situation, it was opposite. Like many times the men are the ones that are in heterosexual relationships. The men are the ones that are like, nope, we're stopping, we're good. In our relationship, it was me that I'm like, no, logistically, it's not going to work. Where Colin, again, he was like, but it just didn't feel like the last one. I want one more to have that experience. So I kind of pulled out the logistics card on that one. But it did take us 3.5 years to finally come to the exact same page.
Hey guys, my name is Shayla. Welcome to the Hey Shayla Podcast. I went from full-time travel to full-time new COVID mom, and now I'm a mom of two. And holy wow, is motherhood and adulting a learning curve. There are so many decisions we need to make and a million ways to do it right. I created this podcast to interview some of my gurus to share their knowledge and empower you on your journey. Let me be your guinea pig and ask the questions you think everyone else knows. Here, we're a little hippie. We try to do things as naturally as possible. We're open-minded, and we don't take ourselves too seriously. But above all, we support one another and work to find what works. If you're into it, you're our people. Let's get started. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Hey Shayla Podcast. Today is a conversation. I'm talking with Abby, and I'll tell you about Abby in a second, but she shared on Instagram that her husband was having a vasectomy, and they were done at 3 kids. And I was like, please come on my podcast and talk to me about this, because I feel like we have this conversation in real life in our heads 100 times with our friends, with our family. Like the conversation comes up a lot. And some people ask unnecessarily. We're like, whoa, that's a pretty personal question. Ma'am, don't ask me that. Some people don't mind. And there's a lot of freaking factors that go into having another child. And sometimes physically you cannot have another child. So you don't have the choice, which makes it sting a little more. And so there's so many factors that go into it. If you are physically able to, your mental health, if you can carry another baby, your financial situation, your daycare situation, how much support you have around you, what your partner thinks, your house size, your car size. Like there's so many factors and it's such a personal decision, but I figured it'd be fun to hear 2 people talk about it and kind of be like, okay, yes, I agree with that. No, I don't agree with that. Oh, that happened to you. And just hear about it because like I said, I just think it's something that's on so many of our minds. So Abby's a type A woman that loves nothing more than a finished to-do list and a tidy house, which felt doable until their second child joined the mix. All of a sudden, she was overwhelmed, frustrated, and felt like she was just scraping by in every area of life. Then her third was born with Down syndrome, and she not only became a mother of 3, but also an inclusion advocate and ally. She spent 10 years as a corporate saleswoman until she slowly transitioned out and is now a business coach and co-owner of Herself Podcast, a super successful podcast. But most recently, her husband got a vasectomy. Okay, so that's what she shared. And I was like, please come on my podcast and talk about it. So that's what this entire conversation is about. I hope you love it. And I hope that you get some nugget out of it or some ideas, but it's a tough decision. And so I wish you all luck in deciding, and I hope you enjoy the episode. All right. I am so excited to have you on the podcast today, Abby. We are going to be talking about the choice to have more children or not. And I'm just going to let you start with kind of like where you're at, how many kids you have. I think age gaps are relevant. Like let's just I'm excited about this conversation because I feel like you and I would just like have this conversation with our kids running around the yard and be like, oh, so you stopped at 3, how come? And like, it's so casual, but it's on so many people's minds.
Well, that's the biggest thing is that should I have one more is always a question. I feel like it comes up when we're talking with friends, when we're at family gatherings. Like it's something that, and it's kind of a personal thing. Like when Great Aunt Pearl is like, hey, you're gonna have one more? It's like, okay, Great Aunt Pearl, like you had your 6 kids, just like quiet down over there. You had your time. But it does feel like something that just kind of comes up. And as soon as you start talking about kids, it's like, oh, are you guys done?
Yeah.
Like that is just a common phrase. And I'm not offended by it. And mostly because I've come to terms with what our family is going to look like. But it wasn't until very recently that my husband came to terms with it. And so that's the interesting thing. We have an 8, 6, and 3.5-year-old.
Okay.
And it took us 3.5 years to decide that we were going to be done having kids. It
Oh,
took us
wow.
that long to finally get on the exact same page and be like, no, our family is complete. We are ready to say no to any more children.
Totally. And that's the thing is like, you have an idea in your mind of like, oh, this is going to be my family. I'm going to have a giant family of 15, or like, I just want one and done, or like whatever. But then you have like another person you have to agree with, which
Yes.
makes it a lot harder. Like your
Yes.
partner who's also raising his children has to say.
And also just the family dynamics that he grew up in versus I grew up in. Like we grew
Totally.
up with polar opposite parents. So
Ooh.
the fact that we're able to co-parent kind of well together, I'm still impressed with it.
I
Like my
love
parents were
that.
free range chicken parents. Like we grew up on a farm in North Dakota. Like, we had like hundreds of acres. Like didn't really have a babysitter until I moved to Wisconsin, kind of a deal. Like didn't wear shoes, didn't usually
Yeah.
wear clothes. Like it was one of those like literally like fend for yourself, you got this kind of a deal. And then his family, he grew up as an only child until he was 8. And then he got a little sister. So it was like just him and his mom, or like just him and his dad. He grew up his parents divorced when he was really little. And they were helicopter parents. Like they were always there. They got him in every single sport. They were there for every single game, every single school activity, kind of a deal. So it's so interesting having to do life and like figure out family dynamics with somebody who grew
Totally.
up in something that's totally different.
Yeah. And I think that was my first question is like, how many siblings do you have?
I have just one younger sibling, and he also has just one younger sibling.
Okay. So you both have two.
Hmm.
And when you initially, because I feel like you're not dating someone, well, I didn't, and be like, so how many kids do you want to have? Right? Like when the conversation started happening, or your family planning started happening, where were you both on the scale of like how many kids you wanted to have?
Yeah, and Shayla, this is such an interesting question because growing up and even in like my teens and 20s, I thought I wanted to be a mom, maybe. Like it wasn't one of those things. And I've talked to other friends like I knew I always wanted to be a mom. I always wanted to have, one or two kids. I always wanted to have two or three kids. I always wanted a big family. And it wasn't really something that I thought about. It was something that, like maybe I'll have kids, maybe I won't.
Yeah,
Maybe I'll be a career woman and just have my love of my work. And I kind of thought that way. And it's interesting because as I was surrounded by other women who did choose that career path, I kind of got ingrained in it of like, okay, like this is what I'm going to do. I'm like
totally.
around all these really powerful women. They can work until 8 p.m. if they want to. They never have to wake up for kids. They can travel whenever they want to without having to worry about it. It was really convenient.
Yeah.
And then I met Colin, and Colin is like dad central. Like even when he was 22 years old, like I could tell he was going to be a good dad.
Oh
And I'm
my
like, I might
God.
not want to have babies, but I want to have this man's babies. And that's
Oh,
literally the thought that went through my mind of like, I would never be able to take that away from him. Like I absolutely want to have children with this man.
yeah.
And we like very early on, we started talking about like two or three kids as being a good number. Like two or three would be good. Two or three would be good. We had one kid and it was amazing. It took us a little while to have our first. So I think that I was just really appreciative of the whole experience. And
Totally.
then our second, we thought it was going to take a while again. So we kind of started trying a little prematurely and got pregnant on the first try. And so it was one of those things where like, wait a minute, it took us a year to get pregnant with the first, like trying all the things. And then we got pregnant like in month one with our second.
Oh my
Needless to
gosh.
say, I was not ready for two under two. I was not ready to have another kid at that time. Like our first was in a really tough, like, wasn't sleeping, was yelling all the time, trying to figure it out.
Totally. And when you had your first, did you continue to be a career woman?
Yes.
Okay.
And when I had my second, I also continued to be a career woman.
Ah,
But
so
it
the
took that second kid to like have to wave the white flag and be like, I
right.
need help. I need help
Totally.
from somebody in order to do this because I can't keep traveling and keep, working this high-powered corporate America job, sales position with two tiny little kids under the age of 2.
Right. Well, and just the transition to that, I feel like it would be so tricky because there's just you're trying to be this career person, but you also have a child now that you are like loving and wanting to take care of. And then now you have another one way before you wanted to, maybe not way before, but like you said, kind of prematurely. And you're like, okay, something's got to give here. Like,
Something's gotta
what?
give.
Yeah.
When I also thought it was like just like how Colin reacted to pregnancy and having kids versus me. Like when we had our first child, I was superwoman. Like I was like, I will change all of her diapers. I will breastfeed until she wants to, like as
Yeah.
long as she wants to. Like
And I don't need
you'll
help.
never have to do a bottle. Like I will do everything. I will do everything because I can, and
Yeah.
because I've wanted this
What?
pregnancy
Why
and
do
I've
we do
wanted this
that?
baby. Why do we do that? Like, why, through our mind, do we decide to make babies with somebody else. And then we're like, no, I'll take all responsibilities and continue working and continue taking care of a house and continue taking care of you, whatever it may be. Like everyone has different titles.
Yeah.
But then when we had our second, I literally was like, there is no way. Like you take the toddler, I'll take the baby.
Yes.
You need to take some nights. You need to take like, and he obviously stepped in right
Yep.
away.
Yep.
But it also kind of came as a surprise for him. He's like, hold on a minute here. I've been a dad for 20 months. And now all of a sudden I have to be like major dad. Like I have to be a dad for a whole child when overnight it wasn't like that yesterday. It wasn't like that yesterday.
Yeah. Well, I was very similar. I was just like, well, I'm just going to breastfeed. So you can't really do that. And I breastfeed her to sleep. So you can't really do that. And it's just easier if I do it. I hear you guys struggling. So I'm just going to do it. But then as soon as you need the help, you're like, hey, could you, well, I know this is kind of, do you mind doing this? And they're like, yeah, sure. Like, glad you asked. I don't know. No problem. Like they just don't usually have an issue with it, but I could definitely see where they're like, yeah, of course, but holy crap.
Right. Well, also like, how do I do it? Like, what am I supposed to do here? And then if they do it wrong by, whatever it means,
By
it's
your
like,
standards.
no, you're not doing it right. You got to do it this way. He's like, I'm loading a dishwasher. Does it really matter? Yes, it matters because efficiency and time-wise, you can run 2 dishwasher loads by the time. Yeah. So like we had so many of those bickering conversations after our second came. And so whenever anyone says like, what was the hardest transition? I can easily step in and be like, the hardest transition was going from 1 to 2 for us. And it was that second kid that was so hard for us. Going from 2 to 3, and we had like, we'll get into it, but we even had, we had a pandemic pregnancy. Our third has Down syndrome. Like the third kid obviously is more. Even going from 2 to 3 was easier, I feel like, on our marriage and our
the gap was bigger.
And the gap was bigger. It was 2.5 years instead of
only 2.5 years? I thought it was more from the numbers.
No,
okay, that's not that much bigger.
Years.
Never mind. But you're saying it was easier on your relationship as well?
Yeah, the hardest one on our relationship was going from 1 to 2. Like that one took a digger on our marriage, and it didn't get easier for like a while. It took us a long time of being on the same page and the same team after our second came, in order to be like, wait, hold on a minute. We're doing this life together. Let's actually be on the same team instead of always competing against each other.
Totally. And I think that happens a lot in I mean, I know I can state as a fact that relationships definitely, it's something that's hard to talk about because you don't want to like share that you had struggles, or you don't want to share the thoughts that you had, or like for me, this is something that I don't know that I think I've filmed it a couple times and I always edit it out, but I remember with my first being like, I can't do this. This is not going to work. Like, this is not going to work for us. But I was like, but I want her to have a sibling so I can stick around for one more sibling. And then I got to go. Like, what? And I told Seth that later, and he's like, Shayla, I was having the same thoughts. I was like, well, how long can we last? Because it's so challenging. And I love, just as much as the conversation is having one more kid, I feel like another like thought that a lot of people have is, what is the thought? It's the relationship. Nope, I don't know. It'll come back because it was a good one. But
I just bring up something kind of along the same lines here. So like those thoughts that you're having, and I talked with my therapist about that too, like when we were early on, and it's a lot of it's escapism. So you're trying to escape your situation, and it's literally like, it's like black and white thinking. It's like, I cannot be a mom anymore. I cannot work anymore. I cannot be married anymore. I need to move to Costa Rica and sell bananas. Like that needs to be my job. And it literally goes from 0 to 100 so fast. Totally, when in reality, it's like, wait a minute, could I just get a babysitter maybe like one night a month and then go on a date? Hold on. Literally. I could do that instead of quitting my job and moving to Costa Rica. Okay, let's start there. Why
is it like that? Because that's exactly true. You can't think of like the very, very easy solution. Like it doesn't feel like there's a solution. It feels like this is your life and like, what are you going to do with it? But exactly that, like somebody's like, well, why don't you join the gym and then use the gym daycare so you can get a workout in, maybe get like an hour of work done. And I was just like, my mind melted. Like I was like, I could get a workout in and be child free. And like the gym here is so expensive, but I was like, that's way cheaper than daycare. That's all that I would need. Like I could just have that. And your brain just doesn't, I've never heard the escapism, but that totally makes sense. Okay. The thought came back around.
You don't want to go into solution mode. Yeah. You don't want to go into solution mode, but I'm glad that the thought came back around, pregnancy brain. Yeah.
Yeah. the question of asking other people like, oh, are you gonna have one more? Or what was the hardest transition? That's what everybody's asking. Like, what was the hardest for you? And everyone's answer is different. So for me,
Everyone's different.
0 to 1 broke me. Like, it was so hard. 1 to 2, I was like, Seth, I'm not crying. I also took my placenta. I know you did that. Did you do that for your
Yep,
first?
sure did. All three.
All three? Okay.
All 3. Mm-hmm.
With my second, I did it and I was like, this has to be the difference. And I did a lot of changes with my second, but I literally remember looking at him like, I don't know, a month postpartum, and I was like, I haven't cried yet. Like, what? I didn't know this was possible. I did not know that this was a real thing. And for me, I was traveling. I was like Miss Freedom woman. I like would go here, I'd go here, and then all of a sudden it was COVID. So like that also plays a huge factor into it. But like, there was no more traveling. There was no more like, oh yeah, I'll meet you at the coffee shop in 5 minutes. No big deal. Like, no, I was on a nap time schedule. I was like, this child was like fully dependent on me per my actions, really. Like, I was like we said, I'm going to do all the things. And it was just like so overwhelming. And for so long, I was like, I feel like Shayla with a baby. I don't feel like a mom. I just feel like Shayla added this baby. And it literally took till my second to be like, and I am mother. I have arrived. I am here. And so I guess I'm saying this for everyone to kind of take other people's answers, everything we're talking about, with a grain of salt. And
yes.
I would recommend sticking to the positive ones. So if you're about to have your first, listen to Abby. Abby's got you.
It was a wonderful experience. We wanted that baby. That baby was good and it was easy and convenient. And like, you know what? They cried a little bit, but it was cute because you know what? You've never had to take care of a baby before.
Right.
And they look like you and you get to like snuggle them. It was wonderful.
Yes. And if you're about to have your second, I could tell you, you're already kind of in mom mode. And so you just add another one. And mine was strapped to my chest the whole time. So I just like was hands-free. Baby was happy. Toddler was happy because I was interacting. And we just added another one to the bunch. And so even me, I'm looking at the third, and some people are like, after 2, you can add as many as you want. It's easy. And other people are like, the third broke us. And I'm like, I'm not going to listen to you.
Quiet those thoughts. Those thoughts. And more from the people in the back. From the people in the back.
Exactly. Okay, so you guys said 2 to 3. 2 to 3, 2 to 3, 2 to 3. What flipped the switch for 3?
Yeah, and during our second pregnancy, first of all, it happened right away. So I wasn't really like prepared I love experiences and I'm a person that loves anticipation. So I love like the surprise. Like my favorite days, like right now, for instance, is right before my birthday. I love the days before my birthday because I get to like look forward to something. Same thing with Christmas. All growing
So
up,
much pressure.
Loved. I know it is so much pressure. I'm definitely a high pressure person. Like, so, but I put it on myself, not anybody else, always just on myself. But it just like the anticipation of it is so exciting.
Yeah.
And during the second pregnancy, because it came so fast, I just didn't enjoy it as much as possible. I get very, very sick with all 3 pregnancies. That's just like what my body does. So I was just so nauseous, taking care of a tiny, like 13, 14, 15-month-old at the time. Like she was so little, I felt like at the time. I can't do the math, but yeah, she's so little at the time.
Yeah.
And just didn't enjoy it as much as I wanted to. The birth was amazing. Like would have taken that and like just bundled it up. And then even the postpartum period, we were in the middle of a basement renovation. He came a little bit early and the basement took a little bit longer than planned. So like I wasn't enjoying my maternity leave.
Yeah.
So every part about it, I just like wasn't sinking into it. So I knew that I wanted one more experience because I didn't quote unquote get to enjoy it as much as I wanted to.
Oh my God.
And now I know. And looking back, I'm like, I don't think I could ever enjoy my experience as much as I did with my first, because it was like every time I got sick, I was like, oh, I'm so happy to be sick because that means it's a healthy pregnancy.
Totally.
And
yeah.
like every time like I felt her move, I'm like, oh my gosh, like she's in there and she's alive, or he or she. I didn't know the gender or the sex of my babies until they were born. Every single time, just like so excited about it. But then, and then even like the birth, it was a 52-hour labor. So like, we'll keep that story for a different day. But yeah, contractions every 8 minutes. But I was so happy to like be in that position. Like everything was just so filled with gratitude. And then looking back, I'm like, I think it's because it was just me and the baby. Like maybe that's what it was. Not
Totally.
really sure.
Yeah, you were able to just like enjoy that. Yeah, because I also had, I mean, this is my 3rd pregnancy too. And the first one, you're like, I'm tired. I'm gonna nap.
I'm going to nap.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I
Oh,
get
that's an
to,
option. That's an
yeah,
option.
exactly. Or I can feel the kicks and, oh, honey, come here, come feel the kicks. Da, da, da.
Mm-hmm.
And like with my third, I'm like, how many weeks am I? Like, what is this? Like, yeah, I'm exhausted. And I'm like, am I exhausted because I've got 2 kids, or am I exhausted because I'm pregnant, or both, or double, or I don't know. But I agree with you. Like it is your first, you kind of get to like soak in a little more. And it's interesting to hear you say that the expectations, because I'm similar in that I want to like kind of project, kind of figure out like, okay, so cool, we'll have it around 2, like planning. And when it's completely out of your hands, because you're a type A through and
Yes.
through.
Through and
Yes.
through. Yes.
So to not have been able to be like, okay, here's the age gap. Here's when they're going to be born in the spring,
Mm-hmm.
and like have all those things. And it just be like, here you go. You were like,
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
let me wrap
Exactly
my
it.
brain around this.
Yeah. We tried for September baby every single time because September babies are the oldest in their class. They'll be the tallest. They'll
Oh,
be able to be I mean, like I did read all the books. Like when I'm talking about being type A, like the people in the audience are like, wow, she's crazy. And others are like, I did the same thing.
yeah.
I didn't know anybody else did that. Like I read all the parenting books that the Americans had written. So I started reading French parenting books because I wanted to know how they did it in other
Raising
countries. Like that's
Bebe.
just how I was. Yeah, love that book. Love bringing up Bebe. But
Bringing up
it was
Bebe.
actually one of the reasons that my husband was saying that he wanted a fourth was because our third baby, we got pregnant during the pandemic. And it was a special needs pregnancy starting at week 20. So he didn't get to go to any of the appointments. He wasn't even there for the anatomy scan.
Oh
He went
my,
to one appointment when I was like 6 or 7 or 8 weeks old, just to like find a heartbeat. And
yeah.
that was the only appointment he went to until the very, very end.
Oh,
So
wow.
in his mind, he's like, I got ripped off from an experience that I wanted to be part of. Like I didn't get to be part of the experience. And I'm like, I get that too. Like you didn't get to have the partner experience because during COVID, you weren't
Right.
invited, you weren't allowed.
Totally. Okay, guys, let's take a brief break to talk about Iksplor. Iksplor. It is a merino wool base layer for children and for adults. I grew up in Minnesota and I did not know that you only needed 3 layers to stay really nice, warm, and toasty. I thought you needed 100 layers to stay warm, and I was always cold and confused. Apparently, you need 1 base layer, preferably merino wool, which is real expensive, but it is worth it if you're trying to get outside. Then you need a fleece layer. Then you need a waterproof layer. Boom, you're going to be warm. I couldn't believe it. I hold up, so I do hand-me-downs. The company is great. They have patches if you get a hole. They have a recycle program where you could sell your old ones, buy someone else's old ones. I just love this company. I just love them. And they keep us nice and warm in the wintertime. So if you are trying to get outside more, but you're like, it's so dang cold. My kids live in these base layers. Hey Shayla will get you a discount. Go to heyshayla.com/explore pod, P-O-D. Let's get back to the show. Okay, so I want to first start with 3. So was that the deciding factor, was that you didn't have the pregnancy you wanted, so you wanted a third? There has to be more.
That was the big, I mean, because we'd already always said 2 to 3. And so that was like the biggest reason. We didn't feel complete
Okay.
at 3. But I will say, and I have not shared this on very many podcasts. So this is like an audience, you guys are hearing
Ooh.
this. This was a conversation that we had behind closed doors. The month that we got pregnant was the month that we said, if we don't get pregnant this month, we're done.
Oh,
Because it was so hard. Like our 2 kids were at like the hardest point in parenting ever. My husband's job had picked up. The December timeframe is a very, very difficult timeframe for our family. And I was like done. I was like, I cannot have another kid. I cannot do this on my own.
yeah.
And 3 days later, after we had that conversation, I sent him a meeting planner for the day that our baby was going to be born because I took a pregnancy test at 7 p.m. at night and it happened to come up positive. And I was like bawling in the bathroom, being like, my husband's not even here. My husband's not even here to take this pregnancy test with me because our lives are so busy. And it was one of those moments that was like, okay, we're doing this. I'm not sure how we're going to do this,
Right.
but we're going to do this.
Oh my gosh. I love that your decision to 3 is that you didn't have the experience you wanted. Like that was
That was one of the biggest factors. I know. And I'm definitely an experienced person. And like, it just didn't feel, like the last one.
I mean, okay, I can see that. But are we factoring in like people talk about daycare costs, or they talk about this family support that they have, or they talk about having to get a
And you
bigger
know what?
vehicle?
That's such a good question because between 2 and 3, our family was on board, our house could do it, our daycare provider could take on another kiddo, our cards, like everything was okay from 2 to 3. Like everyone
Okay.
was on board. From 3 to 4, that's when everything would change.
Ooh,
We'd have to get a
okay.
new vehicle.
Let's hear
Our
it.
daycare wasn't able to take on kids. Like our daycare wasn't able to take on another kiddo. Our Colin's parents are our main primary support tools when we need help. And even Colin's mom that can like loves kids and loves our children. She's like, I don't know if I can do 4. I don't know if I can do 4. Like you would have to split them up.
Yeah.
And so like all of those factors, it would just take so much planning to do anything. And my husband does travel for his job.
Yeah.
And so I'm on my own a lot with the kids. I also have been invited to a lot of his trips lately. So like every couple of months I'm going with him on a trip that's, 2 to 3 to 4 days. So we heavily rely on
Your support.
grandparents in
Yeah,
order to
right.
support us during those times.
Yeah. I feel like that's yeah. Okay, so the transition for 4, it was kind of you're getting roadblocks in all directions. And I feel like because you're with them more, maybe this is not the right. I don't know. I would
I
feel
know
like,
what you're saying, and I feel
yeah,
the same way. I know what you're
you
about to
would
say.
have
Yes.
more pull for if you could have another one or not. Because it's like,
Right.
yeah, partner, I bet you want another one. I can't do it. I'm the
Yeah.
one who's like with them most of the time, and I just don't know that that's in my capacity. Right?
And that's where it's really hard with like maybe the stay-at-home parents right now, the stay-at-home moms that want another kiddo. I understand how it can be so hard for you right now, where your partner's like, but I get 50% of the vote. Because in my mind, I'm like, I know that it's both of your children, but I don't know the fairness or what is right in terms of like who's taking care of the kids more. Because I know
Right.
in our situation, it was opposite. Like many times, the men are the ones that are in heterosexual relationships. The men are the ones that are like, nope, we're stopping, we're good. In our relationship, it was me that I'm like, no, logistically, it's not going to work. Where Colin, again, he was like, but it just didn't feel like the last one. Like, I didn't get
Totally.
the experience. I want one more to have that experience, to be able to go with you. So I kind of pulled out the logistics card on that one. But it did take us 3.5 years
To
in order
decide.
to finally come to the exact same page.
Well, you were talking about because you have a podcast and your co-host is Amy, and
Mm-hmm.
Amy was the opposite. She was on the same train as your husband. So you could briefly talked about this before about how like you could see the woman's perspective. Will you talk about this a little bit more? You kind of
Yeah.
mentioned it, but I want to.
Yeah. And it's interesting doing a podcast with somebody who's so different than you, that at the same time you relate so much to their partner. Because Amy's partner, Drew, and we're both type A, like we both like are the organized people, like scheduling, like we have all those things very similar. Colin and Amy, they go off of a lot of feels. They go off of a lot of like how is the situation going to impact, blah blah blah. Like it's a very much
Emotional.
emotional
Yeah.
experience. And she like mentioned, she goes, I probably would have gone for 4, like earlier on. Now, like once you have a kiddo that's like out of diapers and everyone's on, it's way easier to say no. I will say that it's way easier to say no as they get older. But right away, it's like a third kiddo was it for her partner, and for me as well. A third kiddo was it. Like it
Yeah.
could not go any higher than that.
And she was down to go more.
She would have been down for more. Yep, she would have been down for more at the beginning.
So Seth and I were always like 2 to 3, 2 to 3. And then
Mhm.
one day after Esme was born, who's my second, I was like, if we're going to go 3, we kind of have to go 4. And he was like, what? And I was like, yeah, it just makes more sense to me. Like you already need the bigger, to me, like the switch was easier. The 2 to 3 switch in my mind was like, well, everything's going to change now because if we get a hotel, we have to get another bed or we have to get another room or we have to get a bigger vehicle. So I got a minivan and like there's a lot of changes that happen because then you have 5 and then you're like, and then people are like, well, there's always going to be someone that's left out and you're going to have this like oddball, whatever. And like in the questions on Instagram, people are like, well, who's going to ride alone on a roller coaster? And I was like,
Okay.
what?
Okay.
But that's like the mind that I'm not surprised at all that like moms are thinking
Yep.
about that because
Yep.
those are the kinds of thoughts that we have. So I was like, we have to like round this out. And 4 just seems like complete. It da, 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 da. And he was on board, kind of like we both went back and forth. Like we were like, no, 2 and done. This is it. This is all that we can handle. But we always ask about percentages. We're like, what's your percentage? And then it'll be like right now for me, I'm 95% 3. We're done at 3. There's like a 5% that's like maybe 4, but I feel like I'm at my capacity. And so, and I haven't even had this baby yet.
Right. It's like,
yes. So I'm like, we wanted another one because at 2, people say you just know. And I'm like, I'm feeling, again, I don't know. We'll see in a year after this baby's born, but like, I'm feeling like 3, I'm feeling complete. And I don't feel like I need that roller coaster partner. but I just had I have a friend who just had her 3rd, and she's like, yeah, for my next pregnancy, da, 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 da. And I was like, what?
already preparing for it. Okay.
I was like, you're gonna have another one? And she's like, yeah, I just don't feel done. And I was like, this is a real feeling. Like, it's crazy. So
and maybe that's the feeling that people have going from 1 to 2. Like, think of like how certain you were that you wanted another kid.
Yeah.
And it's like, obviously, like that's so obvious, but that's probably how some people feel when they go for their 4th or their 5th, whatever it is. Like, I'm not done. I'm not done. And you can look at someone else's life and be like, what the heck? Like, I could never, but that's not your life. And so that's okay.
Yeah.
And Colin says the same thing. And this is one thing that we do both agree on with the family size, is that we both pictured, we love a big Thanksgiving table. Like, when we're older and our kids are grown and they have their grandkids, we love the idea of having a lot of people at that table. Mm-hmm. But in my mind, I'm like, I just can't raise them. Like, I just can't. I can be pregnant with them.
Yeah.
Right. Well, that's what it is too. It's like, I can be pregnant with them kind of, because I get so sick that like, you're kind of on board with all 3 of these kids. I can birth them. Love the birthing process. Like, favorite part about pregnancy is the birthing process. I can even do the brand new newborn stage. We've had very convenient newborns. All 3 of our kids got easier as they came. Maybe it's because I read the French parenting books, maybe, just got blessed with that. But the toddler stage literally like destroys me.
Really?
And every single kid, it destroys me. And so I think that was one of the biggest reasons, is that we had a toddler when we got pregnant with our 2nd. And I think that was like one of the things in my mind of like, I can't do this again. I can't do this again. Like, they're going to turn into toddlers and then this never ends. And the thing is that it does end. It does eventually end. You just don't know when it's going to end.
That's literally why I like following you and Amy and Crystal. It's like, you all have kids that are out of the phase that I'm in. And you're like, and you will say this on social media. You'll be like, hey, moms that are like stuck in the thick of it, I just want you to know that I woke up, my kids are still sleeping, and I'm working out. And I'm like,
there's a point in life that you can do that?
Really?
What?
Or they'll be like, the kids have been playing outside for 2 hours and I've been inside doing da 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 da. And I'm just like, what a life. Like, that is coming for me eventually. But it's just kind of comforting to hear that from people who are further than you, and like look back and acknowledge and be like, yeah, it's tough right now and you're in it. And then this is what it's going to look like on the other side. And I'm sure you guys are experiencing, they say it doesn't get easier. It just gets different. So there's different needs that you have each time or as they get older. And I'm like, I don't even know what that means, but
also, like, I call kind of BS on that, because if something's different that makes it easier for you as a human being, like, for instance, like being touched all the time. Like, I don't love the being touched all the time. My life is easier now because I'm not holding on to an infant or having to carry a toddler all the time. I have just one. I have one 3.5-year-old. So I would say that this stage is easier in a lot of those ways of like, I feel like my body has more freedom. I can sleep in now. Like, our oldest wakes up and makes herself breakfast and watches cartoons or draws. Like, she does that. And like, before I was like, there's never going to be a day where like my husband or I are going to be able to sleep in. Like, we both can stay sleeping in on the weekends until like 7:30 or 8.
Oh,
like, we both can do that. Sometimes it's a little bit later. Like, our boys like to sleep in. Our daughter didn't. She would always wake up at 5 a.m. That really, really stunk for the first 6 years of her life. Right. But then all of a sudden she turned 6.5 and she got up and does cartoons. So like, it does get easier in a lot of those types of ways.
Totally. Well, yeah, even just listening to that, I'm like, whoa,
wait, one less kid to have to think about. Oh my goodness.
Yeah. But again, with the, like, for me, I'm the toddler person. Like, I like the toddler phase. I like when they're like, Mom, what are you doing? And like asking all the questions, or when they learn something new. I'm like, this is so cool. The baby, I liked my 2nd newborn experience better because I think I was just like, yeah, sure, baby, stay with me. You're snuggling me. This is so great. Other ones like doing whatever, like I could play with the toddler. So I'm like, this newborn phase, they're just little blobs. They don't do anything. Like,
They just take from you all the time.
yes. And once they like smile, I'm like, okay, we have arrived. And then once they crawl, I'm like, this is so fun. Like, I like the doing, and I need to probably soak up the like resting a little bit more. But yeah, and I think that's all of motherhood. Is like you get recommendations from people, you get advice from people, and it's like you're like, okay, I have to spend the $1,200 on the snoo because my baby will sleep through the night since the day they're born. I tried the snoo and I probably didn't commit properly, but did not work for me. Like, so it's just like there's so many variables, and I especially feel this way with the transition to have more kids, because I feel like families that have more familial support or just support in general, they can probably have the capacity to have more kids. And like, because we don't have a lot of that. We don't have a lot of like, go to grandparents' house for the weekend. Like, I think my oldest has done 2 or 3 nights somewhere else ever. My youngest, who's almost 2, has never. And that's me. That's definitely me of like, no, we'll just stay a little while and we'll sleep over, or we'll like, I don't know. But so you have the familial support. So if you're doing this like on your own, or your husband travels, or your husband does shift work, or like there's just so many factors, or like you don't know what people's financial situations are like. They could be like running on debt, and that's why they have all these elaborate things, and you're like, oh, they're rich, and then it's like, no, they can't afford daycare because they can't do another, or you just don't know. And so there's the financial aspect, there's the support aspect, there's the mental health aspect. And I think that a lot of people don't consider that, because I was just like, we're just going to power through. We're just going to do it. We're just going to have 3. I'll figure it out. It's going to be fine. And then some days I'm like, we do. Like, is it going to be okay? And inevitably it will. It'll be fine. But I like almost want to tell people like to have grace with themselves if they're truly not sure, that they don't have to have another one. Like, they don't have to just go for it and just power through it. It's okay. And I grew up with 2 as well, and I never felt like I was missing a sibling. I felt like we had a great little like 4-person family unit. My mom wanted 2 because she could travel. She's like, 1 in one hand, 1 in the other, or 1 with dad, 1 with mom, go. And so we did a lot of traveling. And that was a really cool childhood experience too. And I'm super tight with my sister. And so I have that sibling bond, and I don't feel like I'm missing anything. But for some reason in my mind, I'm like, we have to give these kids another sibling, like the family table, like, and all of that. And it's like, you can be the host family that all the kids come to your house, and you can have that chaos, and then they can go home. Or,
and then you're responsible for them, or their college, or they're like paying for their daycare, like all those types of things.
But you still get that
exactly
like
right
big family table.
Exactly right. Yeah. The family support, it does make a huge difference. Our family, grandma lives 2 hours away, and she works full time still. So can we call her in? Yes. But can we just call her in like, hey, someone's sick from school today. Can you go pick them up? Can't do that.
Right.
So that's where it's like, it's those little things like, okay, the average kid gets sick 8 days from school a year. So if you have 1 kid, that's 8 days off. Okay, if you have 2 kids, that's 16. If you have 3 kids, it's actually like 50, because they get each other sick over and over again. So, so it just like doesn't really, like, the math doesn't math when it comes to like multiplying kids. But like those are the things that like we also like think about, because and it's just interesting to me, because I watch, and this also happens like when I'm feeling burned out. Like when I'm feeling so burned out, I'm like, oh my gosh, this is so hard. Like maybe it's a really heavy travel season for my partner. Maybe like it's a heavy work season for me. Maybe we just got done with 5 straight weeks of having a sick kid home. I think I was in the office 3 days in the last 5 weeks, between spring break and 3 kids getting sick. And then Colin also got sick. So we had 4 cases of strep, 3 cases of the flu, impetigo, and an ear infection.
Oh my gosh.
And then we had spring break in there too, which was
time off.
8 days off of school. Yes. So it just, it can feel like a lot, because it is a lot.
Yeah.
And sometimes I look at my friends that have 2 kids that are like 5 and 7, or like 6 and 8. and they're like sitting down, having a drink, like talking to friends. And I'm like still like sweating, running around, trying to get my 3.5-year-old in a bouncy house. And I'm like, okay. So if we'd have stopped at 2, that's what my life would have been like.
Yeah.
Okay. So like there are definitely like there's sides of it. And it's just you have to weigh out the pros and cons for you. And like I
Mm-hmm.
love doing this podcast episode with you, Shayla, because we do have different things. Like you
Mm-hmm.
didn't like the newborn phase. I loved it. You thrived in the toddler phase. It depleted me completely.
Yeah.
Like you are ready to maybe have 4 kids when I knew I wasn't ready. I
5%.
couldn't go on. Maybe
5%.
5%. Possibility.
Ask me tomorrow, it might be different, but today it's 5%.
Going from 0 to 1 was so hard for you.
Right.
Amazing for me. Like going from
Mm-hmm.
0 to 2, or sorry, 1 to 2, so much harder for me, easier for you. So like you're bringing 2 separate personalities and 2 separate experiences into the
Mm-hmm.
mix. And I think that your listeners right now, they can be like, okay, I'm really resonating with Shayla on this part of it. I'm really resonating with Abby on this part of it. I have the same setup as Shayla with having a partner that shifts. Okay, my partner also travels, or maybe I'm the one traveling. And they
Yeah.
can kind of like figure out their situation based on that.
Yeah. All right, we're going to take a brief break to talk about non-toxic mattresses. Did you know that was a thing? I went down the non-toxic mattress rabbit hole, which is a gnarly place to be. I found plush beds, and I am a mega fan. I have had this since 2020. I bought a second one for the spare room. They're very comfortable, but it's adjustable. They never get returned because they're like, oh, it's too firm. We can make it a little softer because it comes in layers, and depending on how you order the layers, makes it softer or harder. And it's not toxic. So if your babies are sleeping on your bed with you, like mine do, I feel real good about sleeping on this mattress. So I am a super fan. I do not have a discount code for them, but they are always running sales. So if you go to heyshayla.com/plushbeds pod, P-O-D, you will find it. And it's magical. Let's get back to the show. I think daycare is also a form of support. So if you don't have your like family support, but you have the daycare support, because I've even talked to my sister, she has out of diapers, she's got a 7-year-old and she's the same pregnant as me. She's due 10 days before I am. And so she's about to start all over, but she is in what, like probably your last pregnancy where there's so much information. With her first, she was like, I'm like, are you going to read any pregnancy books? She's like, I don't know, for what? I was like, just to know everything? Like, what do you mean? She's like, no, I'm not going to read any pregnancy books. Are you going to go to any birthing classes? No. And now she's like, okay, I have a doula. I'm going to encapsulate my placenta. We're figuring out daycare. Like, is it too early to start at the forest schools and like all this stuff? And it's like, there's so much more information, and it's a blessing and a curse for sure. Like, it's great to find the information you're looking for. It's not great to have all the opinions sent your direction that you don't need. Like, it's just too much. And we're in that space of like giving all the advice and all the information. And there's a lot of information that you share with the podcast that does not resonate with me because you're working moms and you're like, this is what we do. And I'm like, that doesn't hit with me. And probably vice versa. Like, I'm home with my kids all day and I'm trying to work and I'm like, and you're like, hey, daycare is a great option to not lose your mind. And I'm like, oh yeah.
Oh, wait, that is an option. Oh,
right.
Shoot. Okay. But it's hard because it's also like, wait, but I am doing it. I can do it without the daycare costs.
Yes.
So it's a whole thing. It's just a whole thing. And I get that. Like every time we look to get a babysitter, we do the exact same thing. Like, well, we could just do a date night in our basement, like instead of like having to, okay, we could like swap with a friend. Like, I mean, it's a whole thing. And your mind can definitely push you in the direction that feels most comfortable, whatever that comfort looks like for you. And it takes a while to get out of those habits. Like it just does. So what's so obvious for somebody else, like when looking at somebody's life and they're like, why wouldn't you just join a gym and work out for an hour and then work for an hour? And it's so obvious to somebody else can be like, that would be really hard for me. I've never done that before. I've always done workouts at home and my kids have been right next to me. I sometimes use them for body weight if I need an extra weight. Like that's just how my life is. So it is hard to make change.
Well, and I think I usually use Seth's brain when I'm like, okay, I don't know. I've been like trying to think of like, should I put them in 3 days a week or 5 days a week? Seth, what do you think? Because I've been thinking about this for the past 3 weeks and I can't make a decision. And he's like, well, what are you thinking? And I'll lay it out for him and he'll be like, seems pretty obvious what the answer is. And I'm like, okay, thanks for letting me use your brain. Like it just is so challenging. But I think for us, because Seth is like 3 and done. He's like, once this baby's born, vasectomy, done.
Okay.
And I'm like, Seth, this is a conversation that we're going to have a year and a half after the baby's born, because that's like about the spacing that we do. And that's the other thing. I'm a little bit planning like you. Like I wanted spring babies so they didn't get sick in their infancy. So I guess, which was irrelevant because my second got bronchiolitis 3 weeks in. So like, nah.
No, so it
But,
didn't exactly work out. Yeah.
but he is like 3. We are done with 3. I don't know that you can do it. He's like, I don't know that I can do another pregnancy with you. Because I'm like, yeah, I'm like, Seth, I feel like this pregnancy, I'm like not as crazy. And he's like,
Oh,
oh,
you feel that way, huh?
it's like, okay, cool. Maybe not. Like, I don't know. So, but he's like, I told him about this podcast. He's like, that's a great one for you to do today about how you stop at 3. And I was like, okay. But it's just, it really does feel like I'm at my capacity. And the same thing, like I would have another 2-year gap because I will be 36 at that point. And I know people are having babies into their 40s. I don't want to do that. 36 would kind of be the cap for me. So I'm like, or whatever, like pretty close to that. And my body is harder. It's harder this time. Pregnancy with like multiple children is really challenging. And I'm just like, I don't know that I could go through this again. And yeah, just the shift work is like, there's lots of factors that now that we're getting into it, I'm like, okay, this could probably be it. But I was pretty adamant about, because with 2, we were like, we're hitting a stride. They were like 3 and 1, and they were so fun. And we're like, we've got money to travel. We can do this. They're like getting more independent. Like, let's just stick to 2. So we were on that train for a while. And in my mind, I was like, for a bit, like, I think we'll inevitably have 3. So maybe we'll just do a bigger gap this time. And then we just went with the same gap-ish. So
Same-ish gap. You're
yeah.
like, oh wait, there we go again. There's about 2 years there.
Yeah.
Yes.
So for us, I think it was more of a feeling, not so much of an experience missed, but the decision to go to 3 was just that's what we felt we wanted for our family. We wanted just a little bit bigger family than 2. He grew up with 3. I grew up with 2. And I think that was it. Like the feeling of just like, nah, we're not quite done. And I really do feel like 3 will be it for me, but I don't want to speak for myself yet.
You don't have to speak for yourself, but one thing that I could like just as a coach, one thing that I do like to just, if people are on the fence, enjoy it like it is your last. Like what's the harm of that? Like enjoy it like it is your last, and put like your eggs in that basket of like, no, this could be my last one. So I'm going to like enjoy this part of it, and like enjoy these maternity clothes that I'm wearing because I probably won't wear these again. And like as my body stretches and these different things, because then you won't feel bad for like taking it for granted if you choose either way.
Totally.
Like either you will have another one and it wasn't the last and you get to experience it all over again, or it's one of those things that you're like, you know what? I enjoyed the heck out of it.
Totally.
And that was a good pregnancy because of it.
And you and I are different in this again. I am not somebody that's like, oh, this is my last one. Like I need to cherish. Not experience based, which is great. I think it's good because I think you like enjoy it a little bit more. And I'm just like, oh, we're 26 weeks today. We're 26 weeks in one day, but I'm like, all right, we're almost there. We're getting through. Like, and I'm not wishing it away. I don't think negatively of it, but I'm not like savoring all of these last little. And people would say that about Ez because we were like, okay, 2 and done, and they're like, oh, this is your last baby, and I'm like, yeah, I don't know. She'll be a toddler soon. It'll be great.
Okay.
Isn't that funny?
It is funny. It's like maybe that mantra sits well for some people, and maybe you're like, you know what? Wouldn't matter either way. So in one year out another, I'll fill my mind with something else to pass the time.
Oh, it's so funny. But yeah, because when I think about having a 4th, I just think about like how hard it is. Look at my hair. I look like a crazy person. More than like, oh, I missed out on like savoring my last. I just am like, pregnancy with 3 kids. Holy schmoly. That sounds like a lot.
Seems like a lot. I feel like I would just like lose kids all the time with four. Like there's like very basic things. Like because I have a friend who has five
Lose
kids and
kids.
we grew up together. Like we were friends together in middle school, high school, college. Like I was a bridesmaid in her wedding and our kids go to the same daycare and I see her with five kids.
Yeah.
And I'm like, do you lose them ever? Like, do you always know where they are? How do you do the soccer games when they're all on Monday nights
Yeah.
with five different
Oh
kids?
my
Like, how
gosh.
logistically do you actually
Yeah.
do this? His parents also both don't live in town. Um, they've done the au pair situation. Like they
Oh,
figured
nice.
things out, I guess. But I just like, I watch their life and I'm like, I'm overwhelmed for you. Yet
Totally.
you're literally doing this life. Like you guys both work full time and you have five kids. I'm not sure how this works. Somehow you do it. I
Right.
just know that I couldn't do it.
Yeah. Well, and I think that, what was it? Oh, kind of like, I would imagine, kind of like how when you went to two and you were like, I need help. I can't keep doing
Yes.
this. You would have another transition with more children. You'd just like be like, yeah, sometimes I'm not exactly sure where they all are. And like, but I find them and it's fine. And like your stress level, I feel like would have to go down and you'd have to just be like,
I would have to.
you just
Yes.
trust that everything's going to be fine. Because otherwise you'd go literally insane, I would think.
Also, your oldest does get older. So that's
Right.
the other part too, is like our
Yeah.
8-year-old, she, not that she can take care of herself, but like she knows to like not answer the door and she like, yeah, makes herself breakfast. Like we don't trust her with the stove or anything quite yet, but she does her homework when she gets home. Like she is a responsible little 8-year-old. And
Totally.
not that I would ever trust her to take care of the other kids, but if I'm like cooking and I'm like, hey, can you make sure that, the 3.5-year-old isn't running around in the backyard? Can you just bring them back? She'll go out there and grab them and bring them back.
Right.
So like that's the other thing too is that like you stop taking care of the oldest one, and I guess that's probably why in the olden days, people
Yeah.
had 10 kids because
Right.
the oldest could then start helping themselves and helping the
Yep.
others, and it was almost like a built-in babysitter help with being
Totally.
able to kind of like work as a family that way.
And
It is
that's,
just hard if you have like three kids back to back to back,
yes.
and then add a fourth. It's like you have four kids that are 5 and under. That's tough. Like that would be a really, really hard age gap for I think anybody, but definitely not. I couldn't do that one.
Definitely. And that was advice that someone gave me because I would start to stress about like my co-sleeping. I'm like, I sleep with two of them. How am I going to add a third? I can't. That's not safe. And she always, anytime I'd come up with something that was like, in this moment, my child's not napping anymore. And she's like, you're not bringing a new baby into this moment. You are bringing them into 4 months from now, 9 months, 2 years from now. Like if you decide to have a fourth, your youngest or your oldest is going to be 6. They're going to be excited about having a baby or maybe not or whatever, but like you're not bringing in your baby into this moment. And that brought me so much peace so often. Like I was
Yes.
like, okay, you're right. Things can change. We can adjust. Like we can figure this out and you will figure it out. You have to figure it
You
out.
will figure it out. Yes. You generally have about 9 months to kind of get things in gear. So that's also helpful.
Right.
Yeah.
All right. Well, feel like we hit all so, okay. So then the last question is, how do you feel about your decision?
I am so at peace with
Are
this
you?
decision.
Yeah.
I am so at peace with it. I will say the morning that I drove my husband to his vasectomy, I had like wait, are you good with this? Are you sure you're okay with this? Like you're positive, right? You are positive, right? I'm not putting this on you, right?
Yeah.
Like I know I've been pushing for 3.5 years, but
Totally.
this isn't my decision, it's yours, right? And he did say like, no, I am good. Like I am watching you as a mother. And I know that like you as a mother are like thriving with 3, surviving some days, but like your capacity is hit with 3.
Yeah.
Our youngest has special needs, like having a kiddo with Down syndrome, like just for those with extra needs, maybe it's autism, maybe it's even like learning development type stuff, emotional type needs that need to be met. It does just take a little bit extra care. And so maybe my little bit of extra capacity was kind of spent with helping him with his extra needs. And that's unique to our situation too.
Right.
So I just feel like there are so many things that are unique to the situation that make me so happy with our decision. And it was also like with a vasectomy, we had so many conversations about this. And episode 223 of the Herself podcast, we go into like, because Colin actually comes on and so does Drew, Amy's partner, and they give their side of it. So if you want some male perspective, episode 223 of the Herself podcast would give some male perspective on it. But even when you get a vasectomy, kind of joking, haha, but you still have like 8 to 12 weeks to really make your final decision, because you can still have swimmers up to then. So it's not like so final, which is scary.
Yeah.
But it's also like, there's just like a little bit of wiggle room within that. So if it was one of those like, oh my gosh, we totally screwed up type of moments, our doctor reminded us, you got to be really safe for the next, 8 to 12 weeks there.
Because were you going on vacation? You were like, so like, how real is this? Like,
we're going on vacation. We're leaving in 1 week, and it's
it's still
7.
You're still in the window.
Yes. We're still in the window. This is fresh. Like, you are doing this podcast episode, and it is fresh. So we're still in that window. I'm like, okay, I'm in my like fertile wave right now. Like, I'll be ovulating in the next couple of days. Like, this will probably be the last chance. I am good. Like, this is it though. But yeah, we're going at week 7, and so I even asked the doctor. I'm like, I know you say 8 to 12 weeks, and he's like, 8 to 12 weeks. 7 is not okay. You cannot be unprotected when you're on your 10-year anniversary trip in Hawaii. Absolutely not. So they made it very, very clear.
Funny. But I also agree, special needs or just your children's personality too. Like some kids have wild personalities. Some are like more mild, and it's just like, yeah, there's just so many unique factors that you can listen to this and be like, okay, yeah, those are good points. And then you really need to sit down with your own life, with your own set of circumstances, with your support system, with your kids' personalities, with your personality. Take a real look at your mental health and your capacity and like what you can handle, and make that decision for yourself with your partner, which I feel like is sometimes the dicey part. But yeah, it's such a unique and personal.
And I like to think about all of motherhood as it's a blueprint that's written in pencil, and you have the eraser and you also have the pencil. So like, you have a blueprint, like we just gave you a lot of really good factors. Like there was probably like dozens of random factors that we threw in throughout this episode. Use that eraser and you erase out the ones that aren't serving you. Pencil in a few more that might be unique to your family, and then you have your blueprint. It is nice in the age of information. It is nice to take someone else's, like a few of their ideas, a few of the recommendations, but then you always have the eraser and the pencil tip to make it your own. Totally.
I love that. That's great. I've never heard that before. Amazing. Well, thanks for coming and just openly sharing all of the thoughts and all of the things. And I also love that we have totally different experiences, and that we can say that to each other and be like, well, yeah.
We like figured it out on the podcast episode too. It's like, wait a minute. We're like, if we lived close by, I feel like we'd be really good friends. Yet we share completely different opinions and completely different experiences on this.
Which and that's okay too. So important. But this is a tangent, but I feel like, and we're able to talk about it. I think that is like, again, not this podcast, but that's so important to be able to say, I would not do what you do. I still like you. I still want to be your friend. I actually want to talk about what you do and why you do it, and like why I wouldn't do it or whatever. And in a way that's not offensive. And like, I think that's where so much growth can happen. So I really appreciate your openness and conversation. Thank you.
I love talking with you, Shay. This has been so much fun.
All right. Until next time. All right. Thank you guys so much for listening. If you enjoyed it, please share with somebody you think would love. And I would be so honored if you would subscribe to the podcast and leave a comment and rating below so I can know what you guys are digging, what you want more of, just connect with you a little better. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll see you next time.